on. Hello, everybody. This is Mike Young with aPlantBasedDiet.org, and I am here with Carey Ralston again. Hey, Carey.
Hello, Mike, and aPlantBasedDiet.org fans and team. So good to be back.
Yes, we're glad to have you here. I think we talked to you about a week ago, and you are our consulting chef and mental health advocate.
Yes.
And I know today you wanted to talk about your own personal story. So it's very, very personal to you. We've talked about more general concepts in the past, and we want to hear today, and I know you want to tell us about your own story and how it kind of wraps into what we've got going on with us these days with the COVID-19 coronavirus, people kind of being sheltered in place and a lot of people isolated, maybe not feeling so great because of that. So I know your story kind of ties into that. So please let us know your background with your own story and how you've, I guess, moved from where you were to where you are today.
Yeah. So thank you for allowing me the time and space to be able to share, because there's something about sharing your story, your true story, that can be really healing, but can be terrifying, right? Because you don't know, first of all, what other people are going to think about it. And sometimes to remember where you've been and that journey you have gone on, it can just bring up a lot of old triggers.
Right.
But I really want to share, because during this time, we're, as a world, not just as a county or as a country, we're all kind of experiencing way more overwhelm and depression than maybe we were just a few months ago. And that's kind of I wanted to give an open dialogue about my journey with depression and how I was able to heal through service, through food, and a few other things that I would love to share with you on my story. So when I moved to sunny Southwest Florida about, what year is that? In 2015. I had a variety, I had a large career, and I kept waking up every day with this emptiness feeling. And I remember going to my boss at the time, I was in the diamond industry, asking, do you get happy when you retire, or when do you start to feel alive? And he's like, well, what are you talking about? And I said, every day I just feel like I'm giving my best, but I feel like I'm getting nowhere. So shortly after that, I have coined this phase of my life called I quit my life. And I actually quit my job. I sold my house and with everything in it. And
shortly after that?
Yeah, shortly after that. So I had this conversation in November, and I pulled into Florida in March. So in my world, that was quick, and this was way outside my personality. So at the time, we pull into Florida. I'm married at the time. I have 2 dogs, and we pull into, Southwest Florida. We end up finding a house that we love. We move in that March, and actually, no, I'm sorry, it's April we moved in. And by that November, I found myself still unemployed, about 45 pounds heavier than I am today, and divorced. So I'm in a new community. I don't really know anybody, but I'm in what I consider one of the most beautiful places in the world, and I felt horrible. And I noticed myself just really not getting out of bed, and kind of would come up with some excuses as to why, kind of easy to blame it on certain things, like, oh, it's a new place, I don't know anybody, I just got divorced. By the way, the divorce diet did not work for me. We could talk about that in another video.
What is that? That's an actual diet?
Well, some people, after they get divorced, because it can be very painful, it was very painful, you can lose a bunch of weight. I did the opposite.
Yeah. I hear you say, okay, I got it. Well, also what you mentioned too about not getting out of bed, I think a lot of folks can possibly relate to that right now, right? With the situation that we're in.
And I can still relate to that, going through this experience again. And that's why some of the tips I'll teach you guys today about things that I make myself do, because there are some days, especially with everything that's going on, when I don't want to get out of bed. Sometimes it just feels easier to hide. So just kind of going a few steps back to my story, what I ended up doing was I pretty much laid in bed with my good friends, Dr. Phil and Judge Judy, for about 8 months, and just felt horrible. I would wake up, maybe to get something to eat, but it was the kind of feeling like I was exhausted just going to the bathroom and trying to take a shower, please. That was, I was just exhausted. And, but I had this burning desire within me. And it was at that time I started reading books with a small group of people, which I highly recommend. I read still to this day.
What types of books? Any certain types?
Yeah. So I one of these days need to actually document all the books we started or how this started, but we started with a book called The Secret. And I remember reading that and thinking, what? My thoughts can somehow, aid in the production of my life. And so it just got me thinking a new way. And from there, we went to Think and Grow Rich. And then we went into Wayne Dyer. And then we went to Marianne Williamson.
Personal development books. That's for sure, right? Yeah.
Yeah, personal development. Think and Grow Rich, they say is one of the best business books.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yes.
So that was the one thing. Even though I was laying in bed, I started reading, and I started really feeling like, gosh, I've always known I wanted to start a company, and I didn't know what it looked like. So that was like my one thing. I would get up every morning to do that, but I wasn't doing anything after that. And there was no Zoom back then either. So these were all right over the phone. They couldn't see what I looked like because I was doing them right laying in bed. So as this went on, I eventually, it would have been that August. So August 2017, I was introduced to a friend, and I wanted to, or now as a friend, it's a colleague at the time. And I was telling her about this business idea I had. Now, prior to going to get a meeting with her, which I was told was almost impossible to establish a meeting with her. And many of you'll know who Kristen is. But she was one of the first people I met in Southwest Florida. But she didn't know anything I was going through, or at least I thought she didn't know. But I remember that day I put on my best dress that I used to love to wear. And Mike, you may not be able to relate to this, but even trying to put on my Spanx,
I can't relate to that. You're right.
No, but they were tight. Like that's how much.
I understand. I know what they are. I know. Yeah. I know what they are. So yes.
So I'm putting on my favorite dress, and it doesn't look like it used to look. So I'm going into this, but I didn't have any other dresses. Have you either? I've been unemployed now for a while. And so I couldn't just go out and, go buy a new outfit. So I go to this meeting, not feeling my best self, but yet felt very guided and excited to share this concept with her. So our meeting was supposed to be 30 minutes and ended up being about 2.5 hours. And as the meeting concluded, I asked her, I said, what is a book that's changed your life? Because remember, I'm not doing anything besides reading, watching Judge Judy and Dr. Phil, and laying in bed. Like that's my life. Kristen's my first opportunity to get out of bed.
All right.
A good reason to shower. So
I
left that meeting, and she told me about this book. So I go home immediately and I buy the book. And I'll get to what it is here shortly. And back then, I was a believer that low carb was the only diet that wouldn't help you gain weight, or that wouldn't cause you to gain weight, as I was 45 pounds heavier.
Was it, but even it wasn't too long ago, a couple of years ago, it was keto then, or Atkins, or what?
Actually, I remember getting introduced to the low carb diet when I was in high school. I had kind of been on that path for many, many years. Of course, not sustaining it, because nobody really can sustain it.
Right, it makes you sick, yeah.
Eating more, let's say high protein, meaning more animal protein, and no bread, no potatoes, all those things, rice, beans. So anyway, I was a believer in that. And after I read this book, here's what's so interesting. I felt so bad. I had a drive to feel better, but I didn't know what that even meant anymore. And reading this book, it talked about how what you eat can impact how you feel. Once again, my mind was blown. I'm like, what? I thought what we ate was only to keep us skinny. And
Yeah,
so
it determines what the scale is, nothing else, right?
I know this, some people watching may be like, well, that's not that profound, but it was very profound to me. I really just
Mhm.
thought, of course you ate for energy, but you really more ate, to fit in your jeans, which none of my jeans fit at the time.
Well, I think that's still a common thought pattern out there amongst most people, I would think.
Yeah. And so if you have that thought, let me know, because I definitely had that.
Yeah.
Uh, so as I read that book, it came, thank goodness, to this little company called Amazon. It came very quickly. I read it in under 2 days. And that was August 14th. I finished reading that book. And that morning I decided, okay, I'm going to give this a whirl. And the book actually, and I'm not getting paid or clearly to
Not
endorse this
really.
book, but it was a book called Skinny Bitch.
Yeah.
And I apologize, I didn't come up with the title, but it is an attention grabbing title. The book is it's a little bit vulgar, but in its humor. But I was in such a dark spot. I needed to laugh at. I
No,
needed to be able to
there's
laugh
always
at.
there's always a place for that. There's a way to reach people, like Thug Kitchen is not your normal cookbook, right? I mean, that's
Right? There's another book called like "Go Un-F Yourself."
yeah.
So yes, so if you do get it, which I do recommend, especially if you're in this spot, it was a funny book to read. So it promoted a lifestyle, actually promoted a lifestyle of veganism. And believe me, I am from outside Chicago. Then I lived in Iowa for over 12 years. The word vegan to me didn't, it's still kind of, I was so far from that. I thought vegans, it just more meant like hippies. And
Yeah.
it was a judgment on my part, but once again, I felt so bad. And this book was just saying, if you just make small changes in what you're eating, it could literally help you change your life. So I, once again, felt so bad. And I was kind of excited to like eat brown rice again, and eat foods that I was like, feeling guilty.
Fiber.
Yeah, I
Oh,
was
great.
feeling guilty about ever eating. Oh, yeah, that will help with depression too, just being able to go to the bathroom.
Yes.
That's another. Um, so I started that morning, and have you once again feeling depressed, really low on money. So I couldn't go out and buy like fancy gadgets. When I know sometimes we can get in that mindset of all the things we need before we can try something new. I just used what I had. And so
That's good.
my first, and I recommend that in all life changes, whether you're starting a business, changing a diet, moving to a new place, start with what you have. Don't always go out and try to buy everything and then think somehow it's just going to work for
Yeah.
you.
It doesn't have to be perfect, right? Just start moving in that direction. Yeah.
Exactly. Just take that faithful step forward. And so that morning, my grandma had brought me over a watermelon, and I remember I was terrified to eat it because I was like, carbs, 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 and I'm like, ooh, now I can have watermelon. That watermelon was delicious. So I ate that for breakfast for 3 days because it was a big watermelon. And then I remember having, because I loved hummus. So I had hummus and like pita bread. And then for dinner, I know I was doing rice and beans. Now I know it wasn't a lot of vegetables at first, but once again, I was just doing what I knew how to do. And the
Right.
goal was just try and don't get overwhelmed in the process because it can get really overwhelming.
Yes.
So what I noticed pretty quickly, I'm coming out of like an 8-month depression that was really, really dark and very scary at times. So just starting to feel a little bit of energy, like wanting to get up in the morning, wanting to go take my dog on a walk, wanting just to even be outside was remarkable. I actually have the goosebumps talking about it. And so I was noticing those changes. So then what I did is I made the adventurous move to go to the grocery store and only buy whole food plant-based items. Now that was overwhelming. And that was so overwhelming. It took me, I think I was 3 hours in the grocery store, but it's okay because I had nothing else to do, to be honest. So I went.
Well, those are some good choices to make. I can tell you that. I mean, that's the healthiest choice. I think I kind of started out that way when I was moving into the plant-based direction, went to the absolute, I think, best I could tell. It's hard to maintain that right away, but at least, like you said, it doesn't matter. You're trying, you're moving in that direction. That's the good thing.
Yeah. And so I'd actually called Kristen a few times to get, her tips and tricks, because she was already on this journey. And what I did was so simple. I just went around the store because I didn't have a lot of money at the time. And I looked for what looked best, fresh, and what was on sale.
Yeah.
So I remember carrots, organic carrots were like 99 cents a bag. Grabbed those. Didn't know what I was going to do with them, but I grabbed them.
The hummus, carrots and hummus.
Hummus, right? Bell peppers. And I didn't go and try to buy any of the faux products. Like I didn't try to
That's
go buy
great.
like the faux meats or anything like that, because the biggest reason, they were expensive.
Yes.
So I didn't go buy any of that stuff. I remember I was terrified to try tofu and tempeh. I'm 4 years into being plant-based. I'm just now perfecting and loving tempeh.
Right.
I didn't love it at first. But anyway, not to make it all about the food, but my point is I slowly started to come out and I was feeling that zest for life. And then what started is I couldn't stop cooking and then sharing this food with literally anybody, including my neighbors who had young kids, just anybody, because I was feeling like that was a way I could share this gift. I felt like I literally had just struck the pot of gold, and all I wanted to do was share.
But what did you recognize at that point? What were you thinking and feeling? Because you said you were in that depression, and then you started moving there. So what kind of connection were you able to make as to what was happening?
Well, the first thing I could just make was I could feel the energy. I actually felt like life came back into my soul. And was it just the food or the belief in the food, or was this the journey that I was meant to go on? Whatever it is, I appreciate it greatly. And in the food, it just gave me a different kind of energy, and I didn't feel so bloated. And I mean, a fun effect was, like 35 pounds, like fell off like this. And not because I was going to the gym. First of all, I had that to lose. I've always noticed that with people. If you definitely have some weight to lose, 30 to 40 pounds can come off relatively quickly if you have it to lose. Not everybody, has that weight to lose. I wouldn't lose 30 pounds now that easily because I don't have as much to lose, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I think it's with a lot of things. I feel like when you're in the beginning stages of something new, you always make progress very rapidly, I'd say, and then when you're in it for a while, like I've been in this for a while, like I'm not gonna be able to do that either. Like that weight's not gonna come off. It's all those benefits, the major benefits happen right away in the beginning.
So it's sticking with it and keeping it easy. But the tie between then food and mental health, because I know, and if you are out there and you feel like it is hard for you to get out of bed, or there's just things that feel so heavy on you, whether it's debt, divorce, family, weight, I know all of those feelings. I felt like I had them all at once. And that's actually why I had eventually created Hallway Stories, because my whole goal there was this feeling of overwhelm and loneliness and anxiety and depression can literally stop you from offering your beautiful gifts and talents to the world. And it took me a dark 8 months to finally to kind of shed things that I used to define myself by. I used to only define myself by, my career, how much money I made, who I was in a partnership with. And now I was able to shed a lot of that. And I hope you don't have to go through 8 months to be able to kind of come in touch with who you are. But I am so grateful I went through it. It's what introduced me to spirit. It's what introduced me to a plant-based lifestyle. And it really is what introduced me to Hope Clubhouse, because on this journey is how
That's where you are now, right? Hope Clubhouse.
Yeah. It's a nonprofit in Southwest Florida, but there's actually clubhouses all across the world. And it was there that I was able to connect with people through food who have a variety of mental illnesses, but I could relate. I had experienced that anxiety and that depression that really can be debilitating. And so I love now that food, I get to go create plant-based meals there once a week. I did prior to COVID-19, and I know I will after, But the mission there really involved their wellness mission around food as is healing, and eating more real foods. And they believe in it so much, they have a food forest on property. So a combination of all of these things created this beautiful picture, but I can't express it enough to people. If you're in that spot now, I guarantee it will pass. And there's just certain things I have learned that can help it pass a little faster. And those things.
What you mentioned the clubhouse, you mentioned the food. Are you saying that this is an integral part, the diet, the plants of mental health, or is it just something that maybe some people need and others don't?
To me, it was an integral part in my healing. So I can only, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not basing my story off of a study. This is my journey to healing has been by eating as real foods as possible. And if I can eat vegetables that were grown with love at the Hope Clubhouse garden, I just feel better knowing I'm doing that. And even if I'm at the grocery store, I really do try to eat the most alive foods, if you will, meaning not processed, in their whole state. I feel better when I eat that way. I know when I don't, I can feel a difference, but there's an awareness now. So nutrition was a huge part of my healing, but also was connection. I had to learn how to connect within. I had to be able to learn how to connect with spirit again. And I had to learn how to connect with others and be truthful of what I was feeling, because there was so much healing that came out of that. And I didn't realize how many people raise their hand and say, me too. I'm experiencing this, because for some reason we kind of hold that overwhelmed depression and anxiety in, when really we want to surrender that and allow love and peace in its place. So connection and food were a huge part of my healing.
I have a couple questions from that. You want the pure, I think you said purist, is that what you said? Food?
I tried it. I'm not certain if that's a word, but I probably did use the word purist. Like I try to eat food that's the most alive and not processed.
That's it. So like, I'm trying to describe a little further. Maybe people aren't that familiar, and I'm thinking, well, that's more like food is grown, right? Because you're growing it. It's not like a chemical, right? So you're growing it. It's a plant, because things can be vegan and not be plants, right?
That's true.
And then you're talking about maybe more organically grown, I'm guessing. Is that another factor in that?
I think you have to do a lot of things play into that. So what is accessible to you and affordable to you? Because I know when I literally didn't make a penny in probably 3 years. So I know what it's like to have to shop on a budget. And so I will never make the claim that you have to buy organic. If you can I'll tell you, organic carrots are always a great buy. always. Organic herbs, always a great buy.
They're very expensive.
Frozen organic vegetables in the freezer section generally will go on sale every other week. Sometimes they go on sale for 10 for 10. It's a great time to buy them. But I know sometimes organic vegetables can be really expensive. But where I also encourage people to look is, we have a group down here called like the Southwest Florida Co-op, or there's Hubble Farms. There's all kinds of groups like that, and they'll actually accept all kinds of payment, including like SNAP benefits. So if you are in a place, you can still, and actually I think if you use SNAP benefits, you even can get more produce for the money. So there are options. And at a time like this, I know at the clubhouse, like because we're doing meal deliveries, we are making sure these meals are loaded with vegetables, fiber, whole grains, because these are the things that can help you feel good and hopefully not encourage you just to stay in bed. Because we are fortunate enough that at least during COVID-19, we can still leave our properties and go for a walk because it's beautiful outside.
Yeah. Okay, another question I have. You mentioned, I think a few times, spirit. What does that mean?
Yeah. So I grew up pretty strict Catholic family. And so at the age of 18, I remember being like, I can't do it. I can never be the perfect Catholic. And I don't want to.
Guilt. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to offend anybody who is Catholic, because I think there are infinite paths to enlightenment, and unfortunately that just wasn't mine. So I had kind of ran away from religion, being like, that is not for me,
Mm.
forgetting that we are all spiritual. And on this, in my little book club that I connect with every morning, that is when I kind of started to remember who and what we all are. And that if you can pause, which is something that is a part of my healing, and go within, especially when things feel really overwhelming, where anxiety is provoking, to actually stop and not react. And I have numerous examples just of today where I've had to stop and not send that email, not send that text, not look for the answer on the external side, but going within and allowing that answer to just come right through me. So yeah, spirit, I always, let me put this differently. I have made a commitment where if I notice my inner peace is disturbed, to stop and reconnect. That's like my sign to stop and choose again. And being in alignment with spirit, just all things are infinitely easier and possible. And you don't feel like you're literally, paddling up the river against the current.
Right.
Life just becomes easier.
Is that almost like a little mini meditation? Is that what you're like when you're saying you're stopping, right? You're just trying not to be reactionary. You're trying to, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. So I'm trying to go within. And so I'm a student of A Course in Miracles. So what they teach is to stop and choose again. And whether the names I use here won't as much matter, but whether when you're in a place of overwhelm or anxiety or fear, anger, judgment, A Course in Miracles will state that's when you're being guided by the ego. So you could look at that as whatever you want to call the ego.
Right.
And when you're in a state of peace and love, joy, happiness, like where we are now, then you're being guided by the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And so some people like to call the Holy Spirit love, source, Jesus. It doesn't matter what kind of name. So I just have made it a point that you can really only choose love or fear, so ego or Holy Spirit. And I really want to choose to be in the place of love. And it takes practice. It takes work, but life feels so much more fulfilling. And that emptiness that I had felt for years, believe me, you don't experience that when you're being guided. But that maybe is a whole nother video on how to.
It could be. And I also want to comment that I feel like even though you moved away from, it sounds like organized religion, if I'm going to make a very general statement, it's still that whole concept of ego. And as you mentioned, you also rephrased it as the Holy Spirit is also one that is touched upon and utilized in most organized religions, I think. So it's all very similar, I feel.
Yeah, and that's actually, A Course in Miracles all has Christian-based terms in it. And that actually, I had a really hard time beginning to study A Course because of that, because I only knew what Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit were kind of through how I was raised in the Catholic Church. And once again, there's nothing wrong with that. It just didn't jive with me. And so I kind of almost had to shed all my perceptions of what I thought this was, and just allow a new definition. And it has been so fulfilling to me. And, I'm reading another book right now called Untamed. And I think she calls it sinking. She sinks before she makes any decision. And she allows, I think she says, spirit to nudge her. And so we all know what that feels like. Mm-hmm. It's just remembering to go within and to not look on the outside for answers, because that's when
not to ignore it, right? Huh? If it's always there, we don't want to ignore that in the equation of how we make decisions, right?
Absolutely. And I have just learned too the power of, if I'm in a state of anxiety and worry, the last thing I want to do is pick up the phone or do an interview where then I'm spreading that, right? Like that's not what we want to spread. That's why most of us, when we watch the news, feel horrible. Like, the spreading of no matter how, and I know it's the news's responsibility. So I commend them for sharing, but sometimes you can only take so much. So
I get it. Yeah.
It's a journey. But I just want to reiterate to so many people that depression can feel like the worst thing. I know from experience, and I work every day to shed light and love and not go to that place. But I do know if I feel, that feeling of I don't want to get out of bed, I do have the tools to overcome. And sometimes, you know what? I stay in bed. I'm like, I'll stay in bed for a few hours and kind of let whatever needs to pass.
Right.
And
At least folks have that option nowadays. That's one benefit, right? Most folks have that option where in the normal rat race course of their daily life, they would never even have that option.
Yeah. And the key thing that I'm noticing now, and I thank you, Mike, and your team, is we're talking about it. There's so much healing in talking about that it's okay to feel this way, and this will pass just like everything else, but it's okay. And there's services, there's books, there's people like me, there's advocates that are here to help, and just really know that you're not going through it alone. And hopefully my story, if you're having some of those things with weight and relationships, money, all those things, like I am happy to help in any way I can.
Okay. And speaking of help, how can people get in touch with you for you to provide help?
I would say the easiest way, because there's, of course, multiple ways to get a hold of anybody nowadays, but I know I'm on your website, correct?
Yes.
And then you can find me at Hallway Stories, or you can find me on Facebook. Of course, my name's Carey Ralston, so you can send me a message that way. You can always email me, Carey@hallwaystories.com. And there's not one person I have not been able to connect with via those platforms. And you will be amazed that you're not alone, and how many people have walked in your shoes and are willing to help.
Yeah. Well, thank you for conveying your story, for retelling your story. Like you said, you got goosebumps. I know it affects you. It's probably not the easiest thing to do, but hopefully it has struck a chord with someone out there that's watching right now, or maybe watching. If you know someone, please tag them in the comments, share this video with them, and hopefully it will bring something positive out of this. And I'm sure that I can tell that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to take something that was mostly negative and turn it around and just create more positive, or as much positive as you can out of it. And that's great.
Yeah. And I am a firm believer that together we are better. And when we come together, it gives us the opportunity to remember who and what we all really are, which really is perfect, innocent spirit. We're all doing our best. And when we come together and share, we can really allow healing to happen.
All right. That's a great little point to end on. So thank